Okay, so go ahead.
Start with mine.
Anything that you would like to include? Is that what you were going to
Yeah.
ask?
Yeah.
No, the one other thing just about Dynasty, and we're talking about producers and what Henry did to make Love Boat work. There's a woman who was with Dynasty from the beginning named Elaine Rich, who really kept together the impossible family of actors, some of whom didn't speak to each other, had enormous egos, and John Forsythe was fabulous. He was the father of the set. But Elaine did an amazing producing job. And Dennis Hammer on Hotel.
Yeah.
And Love Boat, he started casting Love Boat and did a lot of that early
And then he
casting.
became producer of Love Boat.
And then he became producer, and then went with me when I left Aaron and started my own company and was involved with some serials that I did for NBC and the 20 Danielle Steele books that we filmed.
What led to the dissolution of your relationship with Aaron?
Aaron? Well, it was an interesting thing with Aaron and with networks. Aaron was very protected and loved by Elton Rule, who was the
big man.
The big man, and then Fred Pierce was very involved. But gradually through time, Aaron and Brandon Stoddard didn't get along, or didn't come from the same schools. And Aaron was so successful, we had so many shows going. At one point we had 8 hours, which was a third of ABC's schedule. And Love Boat was on prime time, daytime, and late night. No show in the history of the business has ever done that. But they started to call ABC Aaron's broadcast company. Variety actually did that, and it really galled people. And we didn't come up with enough new, really exciting shows, that something was going on, and the freshness was, we were all, I think, worn out and getting older and getting tired. And in Hollywood, it's a cyclical nature. You know, you have your time, and it's wonderful when it's there, and my God, when it's over, it's not terrific. Ask Mike Ovitz. But they started canceling the shows, and it became almost a pleasurous kind of thing with ABC to stamp them out. And the company became kind of depressing to be around. And Bill Haber was running the company for CAA and really came up with kind of the move toward Beverly Hills 90210 at Fox, because the major networks, they loved him at NBC and CBS, and when they were free, they tried to do things with him, but they just didn't work. We did Nightingales at NBC that we got tarred and feathered by the press because of what we'd done in the past. Aaron got targeted because of Charlie's Angels and me for Love Boat. And Nightingales was really kind of an interesting story about nurses. And the Nursing Association of America picketed, and it's the second of my shows to be picketed, and got it taken off the air, and then shamefacedly admitted 6 months later they'd had the greatest rise in enrollment for nurses in the history of the nursing profession. And we'd reversed a 20-year trend that women weren't becoming nurses. But it was a sexy, rompy, interesting show. And but when they're ready to tar and feather you, they can't wait. And it was off the air in a short while. We made pilots and they didn't sell. And I just was really, I'd had a lot of years in Hollywood. And when I got out there, I really didn't want to leave New York, and I was ready to do something different. And I left and set up my own company with Aaron's blessing. And having worked with Danielle Steele, I'd been flying a lot back and forth to New York, and I had children in prep school there, and I kept noticing on the planes that both men and women were all reading Danielle Steele and reading her and crying. And that did it when I saw men crying, and I read some of her books, and we'd done the one book, and I kind of knew her socially. And I'd go to San Francisco to the opera for art events at the museum and see her. And I sat down with Danielle and her husband and said, I'd love to do these for television and go back, and it's again Aaron's lesson, go back and do it. If it worked before, do it now. The concept was that Danielle would be Loretta Young. Her public never really saw her. She did one interview a book. She was and is, I think, the greatest selling novelist in the English language after Charles Dickens. She's now on her 50th book. She makes a fortune each year and writes 2 books a year, one historical and one contemporary. And the audience, millions of people bought them and read them. And Danielle agreed to go along with me, agreed to appear in the shows at the opening, in the middle, and the close, sweeping in like Loretta Young. And she has great clothes and wonderful jewelry, and is a beautiful woman and has great style, in addition to being the mother of 9 and running a great household. And I took the project, took the idea to NBC, where I had a meeting coming up, and I was getting something ready for the meeting. And Brandon Tartikoff, when I walked in and started talking about the idea, said, my mother reads every one of her books. Said, I want to meet her. He met her a week later, made the commitment, and asked that I do it with NBC Productions. And it was actually my company and Danielle's and NBC's. And I had the rights to everything she wrote from a certain period of time to a certain period of time. And during that time, she wrote 20 books, and we filmed 20 of them, both movies and miniseries. And Brandon Tartikoff, who was, along with Fred Silverman, one of the great programmers of the television golden years, Brandon had the idea of throwing them against sporting events, like the World Series and championship playoffs. And every time, he ended up either in first place or a strong number 2. And the other thing that was happening when all this was happening was that filming in Los Angeles was getting so expensive. Studios were enormously expensive. Union deals were terrible. And so I started going out of town and loving traveling and loving being other places. We filmed in New York where you could make great deals, and Toronto and Montreal and Prague and Paris and London. And it was a great playground. And I also, during that time, had made a deal with CBS. I did an awful little show, again, another New York. It was about a New York series of apartments that all interlocked, and it was 13 weeks and out, maybe even 6. And I don't even remember the title, but it was not a very good show. And with Charlie Bronson, who I'd met, we did a series called Family of Cops. And we did one a year where Charlie was the patriarch of a family, and he had 3 sons who were cops and a daughter who was a hooker. And she eventually becomes a cop, but not until the 3rd year. And that was a great experience, and we filmed in Toronto. And then in those, before I retired and said, that's it, started out with Brandon, and then he got sick and didn't see it through to completion, but Brandon wanted another dynasty on NBC. And he let Aaron develop a couple, which never got to film, and I developed two. One was called Secrets of Lake Success, where a wonderful young writer named David Sten had written it, and it was about a crazy high school and a gang of sexy teenagers and the secrets of their town, not unlike Peyton Place. And the other one was called Trade Winds. I had had a house in the Caribbean for many years, and I wanted to film in St. Martin. And again, I'd met a wonderful young writer, another one named Hugh Bush, who was from the East and a world-class skier and a great sportsman. And he created Dynasty in the Caribbean and really did a story which was Romeo and Juliet, but the Montagues and the Capulets. One section was African American, a Caribbean, and the other American. And they were both very interesting shows. And they were ordered, and I filmed with Hugh. I filmed Trade Winds in the Caribbean, and it was the last work Anita Morris ever did, and Ephraim Zimbalist, and a wonderful cast. And it was to play in the middle of winter, when all America is freezing, and there's nothing more exciting than the Caribbean. And Brandon was sick and left the network, and a new man came in who hated serials, didn't want them on his network, and put both shows on in the summer. And put Lake Secrets was played in July and August. We did 6 hours of each. And Trade Winds went from August through Labor Day, the lowest viewing time of all. And it got good audiences, and this man kept hating it. And I'm blocking on his name. Overmeyer? Does that ring a bell?
Yes. Obermeyer.
Obermeyer, who came out of sports and had a brief, very unhappy run at NBC. But he canceled the last hour of a serial which was building to a big court showdown of Trade Winds and didn't run it. And all the switchboards at NBC around the country were closed down by calls of protest and letters and strikes on local stations, and they ran it again the next week. And the show has been a great hit in the Caribbean. It's #1 when it plays anywhere down there still, and in Paris and in South America, but it never existed beyond those 6 shows. So after the Danielles and those last two, and not Nightingales, I just thought I'd had it, you know. I'd been very successful and very lucky in television. I had my flops and I had my hits. And I learned a lot from Aaron. And I was very grateful to Danny Melnick and to Ed Sherrick and to Lenny Goldberg. And I made some good friends, and always to Barry Diller, who was there and sort of watching. And I said, no, I'm not going to do any more. I just stopped. I closed my office. I gave away the deals that I had. For about 3 or 4 years, whenever the networks had a movie that dealt with the Kennedys or with rich people or what I would call a Dominic Dunn kind of story, I would get calls, wouldn't I come back and do it? And it was wonderful to say no. And to go back, and I'm on the board of the Modern, and I've been collecting art more passionately and have given about a good chunk of my collection to museums all over the world. And I love being in New York, and summers in Martha's Vineyard, and weekends in Connecticut, where I'm actually a Connecticut resident. Spend all my spare time there. And it's a wonderful life.
Well, television has certainly changed since you began it It's a lot different now with all the emphasis on reality programs.
I don't understand it. It's when people ask me what I think of it or how I feel about it today, I just say I loved what television was. The things I think back to, you know, the cat fights in Dynasty and Archie Bunker yelling at his wife and Noel Coward and Mary Martin singing in their show, or Dinah Shore, or some of those great Carol Burnett's. We don't have that anymore.
And it won't happen again.
I don't
either.
think it's going to. There's no audience.
No.
That's the other thing. We used to, with Dynasty, on the good nights, we'd have 30 to 40 million people. There'd be disaster at the network if we had 20 million.
Yeah.
And you look at shows now, they get 1 million viewers and they think they're a hit. They're doing well. It's just something went wrong along the way.
Well, for an audience of someone who's just starting out or thinking about starting out getting into this industry, is there anything that you wish you would have known when you were just beginning that you could pass along?
To work hard. To work hard, to watch out what other people are doing, for what other people are doing.
And go by your own instincts.
Watch it. Stick with your own instincts, but modify them by what you've learned. And to look to the past. Always look at what's worked before and could work again. And what was there about things that worked in the past that made them work, and what's still practical. The world has changed, and it's changed a lot, but a lot of things haven't changed. Danielle Steele's heroines still, they don't go to bed with a man until he says, "I love you." And they go through hell, but they end up happy. And there's a lot of the world out there that, you know, is waiting to be made happy.
Doug, we thank you very much.
Thank you.
For being here.
Thank you all for coming here and pursuing me and asking me good questions. And thank you, Henry, for years of wonderful work and support and enthusiasm.
Thank you. You're very kind.
I have one more. Just in addition, you mentioned the QV7. Is there anything else that stands out to you in this long career that you've had that you would consider among your proudest achievements?
Well, there were lots of individual episodes of Dynasty and of Love Boat that were really wonderful to do, and I was proud when they were all over and done, even though it was what to some people is that dirty word, episodic television. But I felt they could, you know, match many of the movies that were out there and a lot of the best of the so-called what the critics loved on television. And even there were some Danielle movies that we filmed in St. Petersburg that really, you know, were epic moments on the television screen. That was fun.
Do you have more fun then or more fun now with the art collecting and the other activities that you've done since you stopped?
I'm having more fun now. But I wish I was younger having the fun. It just doesn't work that way.
No, it doesn't. Thank you so
Enjoy
much.
it while you can.
Yeah. Good advice.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Doug.
Thanks so much. Can you get